Welcome in. Thanks so much for joining me. So I'd like to discuss a conversation I'm often having with, mentees I work with, Dharma friends. Also, I guess it's a conversation I'm having with myself often, which, can vary in the way it's expressed, in the way we think about it or internalize it. But more or less, the question circles around, should I, how do I get rid of this particular emotion or this particular feeling or thought or way of being I don't like, right? So, I've heard probably 100 or 200 iterations of that particular issue voiced differently. And of course, as I said, I have my own experience on a daily basis of the things I resist in my emotions, in my reactions, thoughts, etc. So I thought this might be a useful topic to, share a little bit on, as I'm often relating to it in my own practice, consciously or as consciously as I can. And often that really has to do with remembering to bring awareness and mindfulness to a reaction around an experience, emotion, etc., that I don't like. But it also is not just remembering. It's also sort of like, if something's overwhelming me, it's also really difficult to, open up a process of curiosity with it, as opposed to just, how do I get rid of this as quickly as possible? So because this covers such a large part of our human experience, I thought it might be useful to kind of stay in the realm of meditation with this one, because then at least we have some kind of structure to apply it to. But of course, everything I'm going to say and share applies to just our life in general. But, if you'd like to kind of keep it to the meditation realm, that's also fine. So a little bit of background just on Buddha Dharma and some perspectives that I've heard from my teachers and have come across in my studies. And the reason I'm saying this first is because the Buddha Dharma is not singular in its way it works with afflictive emotions or difficult emotions. We can see in some of the foundational teachings of Buddhism, it describes them as something to discard, something to either remedy heavily or discard that these afflictive emotions, namely ignorance, craving, aversion, jealousy, and pride. And of course, there's many subsidiaries of those, but those are the five main ones, that there's something to be gotten rid of. There's something to be cleansed, to be purified, to be seen and remedied. And, just as all the yanas, maybe for those of you who know what I'm saying, the yanas, the vehicles of Buddhism, we could say the foundational vehicle, the greater vehicle, and the Vajra vehicle, the indestructible vehicle, they all work together, actually. So when we see a statement like, in the foundational teachings, okay, now we need to remedy these heavily. We need to, at all costs, not fall victim to these five afflictive emotions, or any of our emotions for that matter. In the Mahayana and Vajrayana, it can change in the greater vehicle and the Vajra vehicle. It can sort of expand into a wider view of what that means. But that doesn't deny that the foundational teachings and that approach are useful sometimes, right? So just something practical here. Like for me, of course, I'm trying to apply Mahayana modalities, sometimes Vajrayana, but that's quite difficult. So Mahayana modalities, which really center around noticing others, centering compassion, centering what we call the prajna paramita, or the wisdom that goes beyond, the wisdom of non-duality in Buddhism. And we center that combined with compassion. So we de-center this sense of, oh, this is, poor me experiencing this emotion. Instead, we recognize all beings are in pain and struggling with their, varieties of these afflictive emotions and other kinds as well. And so this takes the center out of the I, the me, the mine environment, right? It decenters that we're this kind of individual experiencing this individual pain, and it universalizes it to a certain degree, and that leaves room to recognize that the emotion the essence of the emotion might be quite different than how we're viewing it. And so we start to open up our view, and that starts to, play with Buddhist non-duality, or this prajnaparamita, this wisdom gone beyond, or at least the practices that lead to that. So anyways, so that's just sort of, something I'm trying. But when I'm overwhelmed, that's really difficult to do. And I need to, find some kind of remedy, whether it's, centering the mind through shamatha or meditative awareness practice, focusing on conduct, like outer conduct, focusing on, okay, I'm really experiencing a lot of anger right now. I need to watch my mind and be careful with what I do with my body and speech so I don't, hurt others. So all those kinds of practices are part of the foundational vehicle as well. So either way, the thing that threads throughout all three vehicles of Buddhism is watching the mind, becoming aware, strengthening awareness in meditation, and being willing to look at the mind, right? Because if we're not willing to look at the mind, we're going to constantly resist that which we don't like. So even in the foundational vehicle, even though we're providing remedies and fixes for things, we still need to know what they are. We still need to get to know the mind. So primarily I see meditation in Buddhism as a way to get to know the mind, not a way to get rid of things. Even if, like I said, even if we are applying a remedy, we still need to get to know that afflictive emotion quite well. And of course, meditative awareness is our gateway into that, because we start to see a little bit more objectively. We start to create some space in meditation between ourselves and what we're experiencing, our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, our ideas, all of that. So it's extraordinarily important. And a lot of, well-known Buddhist teachers in the West start there. They start with just sit and watch your breath. Just sit and be present. Just sit and bring the attention back to the moment again and again and again. That's because the mind that veers off of the moment into, reflecting on the past, future, etc., the mind that does that, often it's very stuck to its emotions and thoughts. So it's much easier to get stuck in our subjective experience if we're not able to create some space and see the experience, right? So in meditation, we start to taste an ability to watch the thinking mind, to watch emotions arise and fall. And this creates a gap between reactivity and response, where we want to respond with more compassion, with more awareness of, which emotions and actions are going to be destructive, which are going to be positive. Another little quick side note here, some people believe Buddhism kind of says to get rid of all emotions. I personally haven't seen that. I've seen more the teaching to get to know your emotions and to get to know specifically their nature, because that's what eventually liberates us, getting to know their nature. Also, there are positive emotions that we encourage in Buddhism, emotions connected to loving kindness, compassion, etc. So I haven't seen a teaching saying to get rid of your emotions. But as I said, we need to create enough skill in our meditation, enough awareness that we are able to watch our emotions as they arise and fall. And we're also able to create a little bit of space so that we can make decisions aligned with compassion and love in our life, towards ourselves and others. So that's all part of foundational Buddhism, and of course starts to veer into the greater vehicle, or the Mahayana. But Mahayana is interesting because Mahayana really centers this non-dual wisdom, or prajnaparamita, combined with an attitude we call bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, the mind that really aspires to wake up for the benefit of all beings. That a mind that wants to see oneself and others see the truth that liberates from suffering. And that attitude kind of, as one reflects on it and meditates on it more and more, it sort of starts to take over one's life and, of course, drive the purpose of meditation. And then, just as it's meant to do, we're able to see more and more of our mind. We're able to open up to that because we want to do that, which in a way counteracts this attitude of resistance, this attitude of just, give me the fix, give me the pill. I want off the ride, right? Which is going back to, these conversations that I'm often having with people, myself included, just reflections within my own mind on my own emotions and thoughts, which is, give me the pill, I want out, etc. And so mainly that's what I wanted to speak on today, is sort of like this question, is that even useful? Is that going to provide a long-term beneficial strategy for our happiness, well-being, compassion, and then of course, if we're interested in the Buddhist path, our awakening? And in my sense of the Buddhist path, especially Mahayana and Vajrayana, it really is asking us, it's challenging us to open up some curiosity, some questions towards experiences in our life, physical, mental, emotional, that we don't like. As I already said, just meditating itself provides a lot of room for that, because we start to see our mind. We start to see, oh, wow, like there's all this stuff I've been ignoring and or pushing away or, being distracted from. And what do I do with this, right? So part of the process is just seeing it in and of itself. That in itself is incredibly healthy. But of course, we have to know that it's okay to see it. It's okay that we're not perfect. It's okay that we have, thoughts and emotions, etc., we don't like. And I think the Vajrayana really thrives in this. Again, all vehicles have things to say about this, but the Vajrayana really starts to challenge the idea that we need to get rid of our emotions, right? Actually, from a Vajrayana perspective, the emphasis goes more towards knowing the essence, the nature, the non-dual essence of the emotions. That's really the primary thing. Of course, we see that in the Mahayana through the Prajnaparamita teachings, Heart Sutra, etc. But it really culminates in the Vajrayana. And then it sort of leads to this perspective that not only do we not want to reject our emotions, the emotions themselves, when we're able to see their essence, they have wisdom. They have innate wisdom within them. Now, this can get confusing because one might think, oh, well, now it's okay to just, do whatever I want and, act out all my emotions, anger, etc. And the teaching says, be careful. That's not what it's intending, right? That will lead to more suffering. So it's a really kind of fine line, what the Vajrayana is describing here, because we're opening up to our emotions, we're not rejecting them, but we're also not acting them out. We're not taking them, maybe a good way to put it is like, we're not taking them so seriously. We start to see their illusory quality in meditation. We start to see their nature is not fixed, right? And then, of course, we can start to see their essence. And there's many means of practice here. I'm not talking too much about the practice, but, Vajrayana has all kinds of ways through deity yoga, through working with the subtle body, through working with nature mind practices. There's all these wonderful ways to see that emotions are wisdom, essentially. And once that's the case, which is that in itself is quite a, I would say, like a developed experience. I don't personally have that experience, but I'd like to work towards that. But once one has that, one's pretty free, meaning like one doesn't have to abandon their emotions or be under the foot of one's emotions, right? Because if you really look at it, most of us, myself included, we're just led around by our emotions, right? I mean, we have an emotion, we have an idea, belief, a thought, and boom, like we're stuck there. We're personalizing it. And there's nothing wrong with you or me for that. It's just a habit pattern we're trying to change, right? So we could even say there's a mini liberation in not following after one's emotions, but also not rejecting them, right? And then, of course, the practitioner develops that over time until the wisdom nature comes out, which, you all can study through a Vajrayana master and sort of understand those teachings a little bit more. They're very, very precious teachings we find in the Vajrayana tradition. But even when we read the Heart Sutra, when we read the Vajracutter Sutra, the Diamond Cutter Sutra, we can see flavors of this. We can see flavors of what it's pointing to, right? mostly not, the Heart Sutra, it's not pointing to a nothingness. It's pointing to when we find the inner space in our own minds, in our emotions, in our perceptions, etc. But yet nothing ceases, right? So one famous quote from the Heart Sutra is, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. I think I got the last two backwards. So emptiness, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. So more or less, this is a big teaching there, but the form is emptiness part is the space. We have to find some room to move. If we have no room to move, we're just completely inundated by our emotions, beliefs, identities, and thoughts. So the form is emptiness. When we practice that through meditation or Vipassana meditation on non-duality, we start to cut through that. But then there's emptiness as form, which is saying, well, it's not nothingness. There's space within everything, including our emotions, yet they still arise. They continue to rise as illusions. So we have these two: form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and then the quote continues, but I just wanted to mention it briefly. The first two parts are enough to start reflecting, that what we experience, our emotions, etc., they're not solid, they're not fixed. We can play with them, we can learn to dance with them. And then at the same time, they can continuously appear as the wisdom nature itself. So this is one of the more kind of precious teachings in Buddhism that, of course, we study, but we come to really through meditation over time, we come to experience it. And I just mentioned that because for me, that's not necessarily like, how do you say it? Like, I don't feel at fault for not seeing that. It's just something I aspire to. It's an intention I have to see that more and more and to pursue that kind of freedom, right? So if we don't know what kind of freedom we're pursuing, we're going to get stuck. And so if we're pursuing a freedom where we wish to sort of cut off our emotions and be blank and thoughtless, we're going to, I said, not only, that's a struggle in and of itself, but the Buddha also described that as not liberation. That's not awakening, right? That's some other kind of meditative state. So this is why I think when we study the Dharma, we get a little bit more clear on what we're seeking. And then, of course, we seek that. We put energy into knowing that. We put energy into seeing it directly in our meditation. And this is really important. But even just keeping the thought in mind when an emotion arises, how can I allow this experience to be, but, how do you say it? I was going to say let go of the clinging, but that's easier said than done. I guess like loosen the clinging a little bit. Now, in the beginning, we can't just do that through a thought process, but as we meditate, we learn to do that. So there's lots of methods for that. One of my favorite methods is, just for initially getting this going, is the handshake practice from my teacher, Sonam Rinpoche, because we learn to do it less cognitively, meaning we don't have to use our thinking logical mind for that, even though that's also useful. Instead, we go to the feeling. We go to the feeling world. We sit in the body. We open to the feeling with compassion, with mindfulness and awareness. And then over time, we start to see, oh, that thing can exist. It can play out, and I don't have to follow it. And I can feel it. And not only does it help us to feel more free within our emotions, but also we start to develop more compassion for ourselves and others. Of course, there's also lots of practices through traditional shamatha and vipassana, meditative awareness and insight meditation in Buddhism. In all three vehicles that I mentioned, we have different practices of shamatha and vipassana, and these are also really important. I like to combine handshake with other forms of vipassana. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to say, just sort of this prompt, for some of you who are newer to what I'm saying, just even questioning this idea that we meditate to sort of close down and to shut everything off. Even just questioning that, I think, is incredibly useful. And it might seem daunting. It might seem a little bit overwhelming at first, because we might have been seeking that. Oh, I've been meditating to sort of shut down. And we didn't realize we were doing that, but now we realize, oh, that's kind of what I've been seeking. But that's good. We have to see sort of the ways we've been doing things in order to change it up, in order to start something new. So what I recommend is not to use meditation to shut down, but to open to our experience, to be more curious about it, and to eventually bring about more compassion and insight into the nature of our emotions, thoughts, etc. So I think I'll leave it there. This is a pretty big topic. Mostly what I wanted to do is just sort of introduce the idea and sort of, create a curiosity for us, those of us who, like I said, are newer to this idea, sort of an initial question about this. Those of you who, this isn't new for, it's not new to you to hear this. What further questions can you develop around this? How can you even increase your practice of opening up to your experience? Yeah. Okay. So thanks so much, and see you soon.